Luke Shrego is covering the election for France 24, and he's standing by in Yerevan. Good morning to you, Luke. It's a tight race in a polarized country, and there was some harsh rhetoric throughout the campaign. What is the atmosphere like where you are?
Well, as you can see behind me, we're at one of the many polling stations around Yerevan. Doors have just opened. Not too many people here for the time being, but we are expecting a fair few numbers to be showing up. Now, you've got to remember that this is an election unlike any other in Armenia's modern history. There has been a great deal in terms of mood of pessimism and exasperation with ordinary Armenians, fed up of this political crisis that has been going on pretty much since the end of the 40-day war in mid-November last year. Now, of course, there are a record 22 parties and 4 political alliances in the running. That's mainly due to the fact that you often see that such parties, smaller ones, not getting a look in. They have to cross certain thresholds, and they can often not confront the government, the incumbent government, in terms of being able to get the seats. Now, this time, however, Nikol Pashinyan, the Prime Minister, he's only been in power for about 3 years. He hasn't really had much of a chance to use the state apparatus to shore up his positions and ensure better chances for both him and his allies. And that means, especially with the political crisis rumbling onwards, everyone it feels like has been throwing their hat in the ring. Now, in terms of the campaign, as you mentioned, rather than trying to unite the country after this catastrophic war, there have been bitter mudslinging, threats of political reprisals. You may have seen images of Pashinyan holding up a hammer and calling that his, in quotes, steel mandate, as it were, rather than addressing these wider issues and the deeper issues at hand in terms of security, in terms of this amount of navel gazing that Armenia has been doing since the end of the war. Now, of course, you're looking at Nikol Pashinyan and Robert Kocharyan in terms of the former president who is also in the running. And for ordinary Armenians, this is almost a choice between bad and worse. Nikol Pashinyan is the man who lost a war. It's the most catastrophic loss in Armenia's modern history, really. A massive amount of territory that they'd held since the first war in the 1990s against Azerbaijan. All of that having to be handed back after that catastrophic result. And this, on the other side of this, you've got Robert Kocharyan, a former president who many see as deeply corrupt, who brought the country much closer to Russia, though in fact was seen to be as heading up something of a corrupt oligarchy. Now, 30% of the electorate, at least according to one most recent poll, is still undecided. They don't know who they're going to vote for, and only in terms of numbers, both of those parties are bringing in around just under a quarter of the vote. So it really is anyone's guess as to which way exactly things are indeed going to go.
Yeah, Luke, you mentioned some voters calling it a choice between bad and worse. Now, what we saw after last year's bitter defeat to Azerbaijan was not only were the people upset with Pashinyan, but also the military, it cooling its support of the prime minister. Just how significant is that?
I'd have to say that it's not all that significant. Officially, the army has taken no position. Of course, there is opposition towards Pashinyan, but there is also opposition towards Robert Kocharyan, who's been positioning himself as the candidate for security and Armenian border security. Now, Nikol Pashinyan took the step of resigning to trigger these elections earlier on in March after opposition began mounting against him. He really wanted to try and shore up his mandate. The head of the army, Onik Kasparyan, was fired shortly before that, and of course that may have been a foregone conclusion. Someone had to carry the can for this catastrophic loss. It's something that no one really wanted to do, but looking back, you have to remember that in November it was Nikol Pashinyan and the government that was saying at the time, and I was here at the time, and what everyone was saying was that it was the military that had pushed them to sign this ceasefire accord to try and stop the fighting, to prevent any further territorial losses and loss of human life. That's despite denials from soldiers that we've spoken to this time round, who said that they would have been prepared to pay the ultimate price if needs be.
Luke, you've been speaking to some voters. What, besides the war, have they said are the main issues for them?
Well, you have to look back at things on the whole. 8 months on from this dreadful loss against Azerbaijan that was being seen as a capitulation, the loss of these 7 zones and the catastrophic loss of territory, there's this increased opposition that Nikol Pashinyan is trying to overcome by going to the polls. Now, there is at this point no one else on the political stage to step in. There has no one really been revealing themselves over the last few months either. Nikol Pashinyan, you remember, he came to power in 2018, about 3 years ago, in the Velvet Revolution, pushing Robert Kocharyan out. Now, this is one of the things that he wanted to take on was this deeply ingrained corruption in Armenia. He's been seen as not really having tackled that, and with this almost head-to-head race going on between Pashinyan and Kocharyan, it's, as I've mentioned, a choice almost between bad and worse for many ordinary Armenians, and they are angry that there are no better choices, that no one has really stepped forward to try and push things forward, and that with all this bitter mudslinging and campaigning, that these wider issues aren't being addressed in terms of border security, for example. Now, in recent weeks, we've seen Azerbaijan knows that its old enemy is badly weakened. It's on the back foot, and it's been pushing its advantage for all it's worth. We've seen incursions over the border onto sovereign Armenian territory. We went to visit people in those regions. They've lost cattle. They've seen positions come up. Some villages, indeed, have in fact been cut in half with this new border line. And as these issues are going on, trying to negotiate exactly where this new border is going to be, Armenia doesn't really have anything left to negotiate with, and it's feeling, or at least on the international stage, more isolated than ever.
All right, thank you very much, Luke. Luke Schreiko reporting from Yerevan.